I'm James. I'm 34 years old, and my parents wrote me out of the will after I paid over $75,000 to save their house from foreclosure. But before I tell you how a single, 5-word text message I sent brought their whole world crashing down, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's good to know you're out there. The end of my old life didn't happen in a blaze of glory or a shouting match. It happened quietly, with the buzz of a text message on a Tuesday afternoon. I was at my desk, trying to solve a coding problem that had been bugging me all day, when my phone lit up. It was my dad. I felt that familiar knot tighten in my stomach, the one that always appeared when his name flashed on my screen. For the past decade, a call from my parents usually meant one thing. They needed something. Money, a leaky faucet fixed, a ride to a doctor's appointment. And like always, I would provide. But this time was different. This time I knew the truth. The message was short, blunt, and completely oblivious to the canyon that had opened up between us just a few weeks prior. It read, "Mortgage is due." Not, "Hey son, how are you?" Not, "Hope you're having a good week." Just 5 words. A demand. An expectation. As if nothing had changed. As if he hadn't stood in his own living room and calmly explained to me that the house I had poured my sweat and savings into would never be mine. That everything, the roof I'd patched, the pipes I'd fixed, the kitchen I'd retiled, the mortgage I'd paid month after weary month, was all going to my younger brother, Michael. I stared at the message. Mortgage is due. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could feel 10 years of resentment, of being taken for granted, of being the reliable, invisible son, welling up inside me. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the utter lack of acknowledgement, the casual disrespect. They had made their choice. They had chosen the artistic son who couldn't hold a job over the son who held their entire lives together. They had shown me, in black and white on a legal document, exactly what I was worth to them. Nothing. My fingers finally moved. I typed 5 words of my own. 5 words that would end an era of servitude and start a war I never wanted to fight, but knew I had to win. I hit send. The little blue bubble popped up on my screen. Ask the air. Then, I put my phone on silent, tossed it onto the sofa, and for the first time in my adult life, I took a deep breath that was entirely my own. I opened my laptop, not to work, but to a new document I had created just a few days earlier. It was titled, "My Financial Independence Plan." It was time to get to work on the only project that mattered now. Saving myself. To understand why those 5 words carried the weight of a nuclear bomb, you have to understand the decade that came before them. It wasn't one big, dramatic betrayal. It was a slow burn. 1,000 tiny cuts that you barely notice until you realize you're bleeding out. It started right after I graduated from Oregon State with my engineering degree. I landed a good job at a tech firm in Portland. I was proud. I thought my parents, Richard and Denise, were proud too. I was the first Wilson to get a college degree. I was stable. I was responsible. And that, I soon learned, was my curse. My dad had taken early retirement due to what he always called health issues. A vague collection of ailments that seemed to flare up whenever manual labor was required. My mom, Denise, had never worked. They lived in the same 2-story brick house in Salem they'd bought 30 years ago, the house I grew up in. It was their pride and joy, but houses, like people, get old and needy. My younger brother, Michael, was the opposite of me in every way. He was 30, but he had the financial discipline of a teenager. He drifted from one passion project to another. A YouTube channel that got 50 views. A TikTok account where he did cringeworthy dances. A brief stint as a freelance graphic designer, where his only client was my mom, who paid him to design a new church bulletin. He was charming, everyone said so. But charm doesn't pay rent. So my parents paid it. And when they couldn't, I did. My weekends for the last 10 years had a rhythm. Drive 45 minutes from my Portland apartment to my parents' house in Salem. The first thing I'd hear wasn't, "How was your week, son?" It was, "James, thank God you're here. The garbage disposal is making that noise again." I remember one Saturday in July, it must have been 5 or 6 years ago. The heat was blistering. I had spent 8 hours on their roof, replacing shingles that had been peeling away for years. Sweat was pouring down my face, my back ached, and my hands were raw. I finally came down, exhausted, to find my dad sitting in a lawn chair in the shade, drinking a lemonade. Michael was inside, in the air-conditioned living room, editing a video. "You missed a spot," my dad said, pointing up at the roof with his glass. He wasn't trying to be cruel. He just didn't see it. He didn't see the sweat, the effort, the sacrifice. He just saw a task that needed doing, and I was the tool to do it. I just nodded, climbed back up the ladder, and fixed the spot. The financial side was even worse. It started with small things. "James, can you spot us a couple hundred for the electric bill? My pension check is late." It was never late. Then it escalated. 3 years ago, my dad sat me down. The bank was threatening to reevaluate their mortgage rate. They couldn't afford the new payments. I saw the genuine fear in my mom's eyes. So I did what the responsible son does. I took over the mortgage payments. All $2,900 every single month. It was a massive chunk of my salary. But what was the alternative? Let them lose their home? My own life was put on hold. My girlfriend at the time, Emma, couldn't understand it. We'd be planning a vacation, and I'd have to cancel because my mom's car needed a new transmission. We'd be saving for a down payment on our own place, and that money would get diverted to a new water heater for them. "They're using you, James," she told me one night, her voice filled with a frustration I couldn't yet allow myself to feel. "You're not their son. You're their retirement plan." I got defensive. "They're my parents, Emma. They need me." "No," she said, her eyes sad. "They need your wallet. Michael gets their love. You get their bills." We broke up a few months later. She was right, of course. I just wasn't ready to admit it. The breaking point, the moment the slow burn finally reached the fuse, happened on a Sunday afternoon in early spring of this year. I was over at their house, doing my weekly duty of sorting their mail and bills because my mom claimed she just couldn't figure out all this online stuff. I was at the dining room table, a messy pile of envelopes in front of me, and there it was, a thick, cream-colored envelope from a law firm. On the front, in crisp black letters, it said, "Last Will and Testament of Richard and Denise Wilson." I wasn't snooping. Honestly, my first thought was, good. They finally got their affairs in order. I should probably know what's in here so I can handle things when the time comes. Because who else would handle it? Michael? He probably thought an estate plan was a new type of investment portfolio for crypto. My mom was outside, tending to her prize-winning orchids. My dad was napping in his armchair. The house was quiet. I slid my finger under the flap and opened the envelope. My heart was beating a little faster, not with suspicion, but with a sense of duty. I flipped through the legal jargon to the page that mattered. Article 3, Distribution of Assets. I scanned the paragraphs, my eyes searching for my name, and then I found it. It was one sentence, tucked away at the end of a long paragraph detailing what Michael would receive. "We love both our sons, James and Michael, and we know James, with his successful career and independent spirit, will understand our decision to leave our entire estate to his brother, who will need the security more." Entire estate. I read it again. The house I was paying for. The savings account, the one I'd helped pad. The new SUV in the driveway, the one I had to co-sign for because their credit was shot. Even my mom's wedding ring. Everything. To Michael. My inheritance? A single sentence telling me I should understand. The air left my lungs. The room felt like it was tilting. It wasn't about the money. I had my own career, my own savings. It was the casual, brutal dismissal of everything I had ever done. It was the confirmation of every fear Emma had ever voiced. I wasn't their son. I was their utility. And now that they had a plan for after they were gone, a plan where Michael was secure, my purpose was fulfilled. Just then, my mom, Denise, walked in from the backyard, holding a pair of gardening shears. She smiled when she saw me. "Oh, James, you're still here. I was just about to prune the roses. Do you think you could take a look at the dishwasher before you go? It's making that noise again." I didn't look up from the paper. Couldn't. I just held it up, my hand shaking slightly. "Mom," I said, my voice raspy. "What is this?" Her smile vanished. Her eyes darted from my face to the will in my hand, and for a split second, I saw pure, unadulterated panic. Then the mask slipped back on. "Oh, that," she said, trying for a light tone. "That's just, you know, paperwork. For the future." "I'm in it," I said, my voice flat. "It says you love me, and that I should understand." My dad, woken by our voices, shuffled into the room. He saw the will in my hand and let out a heavy sigh, as if I was the one creating a problem. "James, don't be so dramatic," he said, his voice laced with disappointment. "You're doing fine for yourself. You're successful. Michael is still finding his way. He needs this. It's for his security." A laugh escaped my lips. It was a bitter, ugly sound. His security? He's 30 years old. His security is funded by my labor. I pay the mortgage on this house. I fixed the roof you're standing under. I co-signed for the car you drive. I have poured my life into this family, into this house, dollar by dollar, hour by hour. And you give it all to him because he's finding his way? "We just wanted your brother to feel secure," my mother whispered, wringing her hands. She wouldn't look me in the eye. "And what about me?" I asked, my voice dropping to an icy calm. "What about my security? Or does that not matter? Was I just the bridge to get you to this point, to be discarded once you were safely across?" Silence. The deafening, damning silence of two people who had no answer because I had just spoken the absolute truth. They had used me, and they felt no remorse. They felt entitled to it. I slowly placed the will back on the table. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I looked at my father, the man who taught me how to throw a baseball but never how to value myself. I looked at my mother, the woman who was supposed to be my fiercest protector, who had just handed me my own eviction notice from her heart. "Thank you," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth, "for showing me where I really stand." I walked out of that house, the screen door slamming shut behind me. I got in my car and drove, not looking back. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I was never going back to the life I had before. The slow burn was over. The explosion was coming. The 2 weeks after I walked out of my parents' house were the quietest of my life. And the loudest. The silence from them was absolute. No calls. No texts. No "Are you okay, son?" It was as if I had simply evaporated. But inside my own head, it was a screaming inferno. Every memory of the past 10 years replayed itself, but now it was tainted, poisoned by the truth I had seen in that will. Every time I'd fixed a pipe, paid a bill, or given up a weekend, I hadn't been helping. I had been enabling. I had been a fool. I went through the stages of grief, I guess. At first, it was just a deep, gut-wrenching pain. The little boy inside me who just wanted his parents' approval was crying. How could they? After everything I'd done? I'd scroll through old family photos on my phone, Christmas, birthdays, a fishing trip with my dad years ago. I'd feel a pang of loss so sharp it would take my breath away. I almost called my mom a dozen times, my thumb hovering over her contact photo, wanting to believe it was all a big misunderstanding. But then, the sadness started to curdle into anger, a cold, hard anger that was clarifying. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a choice. They had chosen. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized Emma was right. They didn't see me. They saw a resource. A reliable, bottomless bank account with a toolbox. That's when the text from my dad arrived. "Mortgage is due." That was the moment the grief died and something else was born. It was the final, callous shove that sent me over the edge. It wasn't just that he was asking for the money. It was the way he asked. The entitlement. The assumption that even after they had shown me I meant nothing to them, I would still dutifully play my part. That's when I sent the 5-word reply, "Ask the heir." The immediate aftermath was a flurry of digital panic from them. 10 minutes after my text, my mom messaged me, "James, that's not funny. Your father is very upset. You need to call us." I ignored it. An hour later, a text from Michael, Dude, WTF? You're overreacting. Mom and Dad didn't mean it like that. You know I'm not good with this stuff. I ignored that too. My silence was my new weapon. For years, my voice hadn't mattered. So I decided to see how they'd handle the absence of my money. But ignoring them wasn't enough. I needed to protect myself. The anger had solidified into a plan. That night, I sat down at my laptop, and I began the process of methodically, surgically, untangling myself from their lives. It was like performing an operation on myself without anesthetic. First, the joint bank account. The one I had set up years ago to make the mortgage transfers easier. My name was on it along with my mom's. I logged into the banking portal. My salary had been direct deposited into that account for years. I saw the upcoming mortgage payment, scheduled to go out in 3 days. I saw a dozen small debits, Netflix, the grocery store, a gas station near their house. They were living off me in ways I hadn't even fully realized. My hand trembled slightly as I navigated to the account settings. Close account. A warning popped up. This will cancel all scheduled payments. Are you sure you want to proceed? Was I sure? A decade of my life, of my earnings, of my sacrifice, was tied to this account. Closing it felt final. Felt like burning a bridge. But then I pictured the words in the will. We know James will understand. Yes, I whispered to the empty room. I'm sure. I clicked the button. A confirmation screen appeared. It was done. Next, the utilities. The electric bill, the water bill, the internet. All of them were on autopay from my personal credit card. I had set it up years ago after they'd had their power shut off once for forgetting to pay. One by one, I logged into each provider's website. I navigated through the menus, my clicks precise and deliberate. Manage payment methods. Remove card. Cancel autopay. Click, click, click. Each click was a small act of rebellion. A severance. Then the SUV. The one I had co-signed for. This was trickier. I couldn't just remove my name. I called the financing company the next day. I explained the situation to a woman on the phone who sounded bored. I'm a co-signer on a loan and I want to be removed, I said. That's not possible, sir, unless the primary borrower refinances the loan under their own name, she recited, probably for the 100th time that day. And what if they can't get approved for a refinance on their own? I asked, already knowing the answer. Then you remain equally responsible for the loan, she said. If payments are missed, it will affect your credit score as well as theirs. I felt a surge of frustration. Of course, they had me trapped. But then an idea came to me. Cold, simple idea. Okay, I said. Thank you for the information. I hung up. I couldn't get my name off the loan, but the payments were coming from my account. Or they were. I had already closed that account. They would have to figure out how to pay it themselves. If they missed a payment, yes, it would ding my credit. But my credit was excellent. I could absorb a hit. Could they? If it went into default, the car would be repossessed. That wasn't my problem anymore. The final step was my phone. I went into my calendar and deleted every single reminder. Call mom. Check on dad's prescription. Pay parents' mortgage. I deleted them all. My calendar, for the first time in years, was empty. It was just mine. A few days later, the real desperation from them began. My mom tried calling. I let it ring. Then came the text. James, I got a notification that the mortgage payment failed. Why did you do that? This is serious. I replied with the same cold logic they had taught me. It's no longer my responsibility. As per your will, the house belongs to Michael. The mortgage should be his responsibility too. Michael texted me again, this time with more anger. You're being so selfish. You're gonna let them lose the house? After everything they did for you. I stared at that message. Everything they did for me? They had given me life, yes. But they had spent the last decade demanding I pay for it, with interest. I typed back, what they did for me was write me out of their life's biggest asset while still expecting me to pay for it. What I'm doing now is called setting a boundary. You should Google it. You might learn something. He didn't reply. The storm had broken. The lines were drawn. I stood on one side, alone. with my bruised heart and my newfound freedom. On the other side stood my family, huddled together, about to find out what life was like without their human safety net. They had no idea how far I was willing to let them fall. The days that followed my decision were strange. It was like living in the calm, quiet center of a hurricane I had created. My phone, once a constant source of obligations, fell silent. The knot in my stomach began to loosen, replaced by a fragile sense of peace. But I knew the winds were raging just beyond my sight, and it was only a matter of time before the debris started to fly. I started reclaiming my life in small ways. I bought a new camera, something I'd wanted for years but had always told myself was too frivolous an expense. I started taking walks in the morning before work, exploring the streets of Portland, actually seeing the city I lived in instead of just using it as a home base for my trips to Salem. The first sign that the storm was hitting their shore came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Lorraine, my parents' next-door neighbor for over 20 years, called me. She was a sweet, frail woman who I'd helped with her groceries more times than I could count. "James, dear," she said, her voice thin and worried. "I don't mean to pry, but is everything all right with your folks? Your mother came over this morning asking if I knew any good real estate agents." She looked frantic. "I'm not sure, Mrs. Lorraine," I said, keeping my voice even. "We had a bit of a disagreement." "Oh dear," she said. "Well, I hope you sort it out. Your father has been trying to fix the fence between our yards all morning. He nearly took a tumble. He doesn't look well." A part of me, the old me, felt a pang of guilt. But then another thought surfaced. He doesn't look well. That was the family motto. The second piece of debris flew in a week later, this time via text from another old neighbor, Mr. Walter. He was a retired mailman, a no-nonsense kind of guy. His text was blunt. "James, your parents got a certified letter today. Looked official. From the bank. After the mailman left, I saw your mom open it and she just crumpled. You should call them. A certified letter." I knew what that meant. Notice of default. The first legal step in the foreclosure process. It wasn't a suggestion anymore. It was a warning with a deadline. The real test came a few days after that. I was just getting home from work when my doorbell buzzed. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and my blood ran cold. It was Michael. He looked terrible. His usually styled hair was a mess. His eyes were wide with panic, and he was clutching a thick stack of papers. I almost didn't open the door, but some morbid curiosity took over. I unlocked it and stood in the doorway, blocking his entry. "What do you want, Michael?" I asked. "I just need 5 minutes, man," he said, out of breath. "Please, I'm not here to ask for money." That surprised me. "Then what are you here for?" He thrust the papers at me. It was the notice of default from the bank. "I don't understand any of this," he said, his voice cracking. "I called the bank, and they started using all these words. Delinquency, acceleration clause, reinstatement period. I don't know what any of it means. I thought you could just explain it to me. Tell me what to do." I looked from his desperate face down to the papers. He wasn't asking for a handout. He was asking for the one thing I had always given him for free, my knowledge, my competence, my guidance. He was asking me to manage his crisis for him. "What about your inheritance?" I asked casually, my voice devoid of emotion. "The one you were so excited about." He looked down at his shoes, ashamed. "It's not liquid. Mom and Dad said it's all in some investment portfolio. If we pull it out now, there's a huge penalty. I didn't think it would happen this fast." "You didn't think?" I repeated, the words hanging in the air between us. "That's the problem, Michael. You never think. You just assume someone else will do the thinking for you." "Me? It's not like that," he stammered. "I thought Mom and Dad had it under control. They always have it under control." "No," I said, a cold clarity washing over me. "They never had it under control. I had it under control, and now I don't. This is what happens. This is the lesson you were supposed to learn 10 years ago. Welcome to adulthood. It's a bit of a shock, isn't it?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The quiet truth was more devastating than any shout. He just stood there, speechless, the papers shaking in his hand. "I'm not going to help you, Michael," I said softly. "Not because I can't, but because I shouldn't. You're the heir. It's time you learned what that really means." I closed the door, leaving him standing in the hallway. As I walked back into my silent apartment, I had a strange thought. I remembered seeing my dad in the yard, looking perfectly capable of manual labor. I went to my laptop and pulled up the new camera I'd bought. I scrolled through the photos I'd been taking. Cityscapes, interesting shadows, portraits of strangers. Then I stopped on one. It was a long-distance shot I had snapped from my car that day I drove by their house. It was blurry, taken through the windshield, but it was clear enough. There was my father, the man with the bad back, hoisting a 40-pound bag of fertilizer off the ground. I saved the photo to a new folder on my desktop. I labeled the folder Evidence. I didn't know why I was doing it, not really, but a small, cold voice in the back of my mind whispered, "The storm isn't over, and you need to be ready for the real hurricane." The hurricane made landfall on a Saturday. I had just gotten back from a photography workshop, feeling clear-headed and calm for the first time in weeks. As I pulled into my apartment complex, I saw it. My parents' silver minivan, the one I co-signed for, was parked in a visitor spot. And standing near the entrance, like a grim welcoming committee, were my father, my mother, and Michael. My heart sank. This was it. The final, desperate stand. I parked my car, took a deep breath, and walked towards them. I felt strangely detached, like I was watching a scene from a movie. My mother, Denise, spoke first. Her voice trembled, and she had clearly been crying. "James, we didn't want to have to come here, but you won't answer our calls. Things are out of hand. The bank is sending someone to assess the property next week." My father, Richard, looked older and more tired than I had ever seen him. The confident bluster was gone, replaced by a weary desperation. "We made a mistake, son," he said, his eyes on the ground. "I know that now, but if we lose the house, your mother, she won't survive it." It was the classic guilt trip, the one they had perfected over years. But it didn't work anymore. The spell was broken. "A mistake?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Forgetting to take out the trash is a mistake. Deciding that one son is worthless after he has single-handedly kept you afloat for a decade. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. A deliberate one. So my question is, why? When you sat down to write that will, why did you decide I wasn't worth including?" My father flinched. He had no answer. My mother stepped forward. "We thought you'd always be okay. You're strong, you've always been the strong one. And Michael gets to be weak?" I shot back, finally turning to my brother, who had remained silent, staring at his feet. "He gets to fail and fail and fail again, and his reward is everything I ever worked to maintain? While my reward is to be told I'm strong enough to be discarded. We didn't know it would come to this," my mother pleaded, her voice rising in panic. "Can't you help? Just this once. Just for a few months until we can stabilize things. We'll change the will. I promise." I almost laughed. The offer was so transparently hollow. They would only change it now that their own security was threatened. I shook my head slowly. "No. No?" my father echoed, his head snapping up, a flash of the old anger in his eyes. "No," I repeated firmly. "And I want you to understand why. It's not because I can't help. It's because if I do, nothing will change. You'll go right back to believing you never have to. Michael will go right back to being a child. And I will go right back to being your safety net. That life is over. The lesson has to be learned. By all of you." Michael finally looked at me. His eyes filled with a bewildering mix of resentment and desperation. "I didn't realize it was this complicated," he mumbled. I just thought you'd walk away for a bit and then come back. You always come back." "That was my mistake," I said. "Not this time." I turned and walked past them, into my building, without another word. I could feel their eyes on my back, but I didn't stop. That, I thought, was the end of it. but I had underestimated their capacity for cruelty. A week later, I was at work when my colleague Olivia leaned over my cubicle wall. "Hey, James," she said, looking uncomfortable. "Are you on Facebook much? You might want to check your mom's page." A sense of dread washed over me. I rarely used Facebook, but I logged in. And there it was. My mother had launched a full-scale public smear campaign. She had posted a picture of their house, a lovely shot from the summer with her roses in full bloom. The caption was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive manipulation. "It is the most heartbreaking thing a parent can experience," she wrote. "To have your own son turn his back on you in your time of need, to abandon his sick and aging parents, refusing to help after everything we sacrificed for him. We may lose our home, but the loss of our son hurts more." My father had chimed in with a post of his own. "We raised James to be a man of character, a man who loved his family. We never thought he would be the one to walk away when we needed him most, all because of a misunderstanding about money. The house is just bricks and mortar, but family is supposed to be forever." But Michael's post was the one that made my blood boil. He posted a black and white, artistic photo of a wilting flower. "Some people only know how to be kind when they're looking down on you," he wrote. "But the moment family asks them to be an equal, to step down and help carry the load, they run away and call it strength. I call it cowardice." The comments were a flood of sympathy for them. Old family friends, distant relatives. "Oh, Denise, I'm so sorry. Thinking of you, Richard. Michael, your brother should be ashamed of himself. I was being tried and convicted in the court of public opinion, based on a complete fabrication. They had taken my pain and twisted it into a weapon against me. That night, I sat in my apartment, the glow of the screen illuminating the rage on my face. They wanted a public fight? Fine. They were about to get one. But I wasn't going to fight with their weapons of emotion and lies. I was going to fight with mine. The cold, hard, undeniable truth. I opened the evidence folder on my desktop. I took a deep breath, and I started to compose a post of my own. It was short, it was simple, and it was devastating. I wrote, "There are two sides to every story. For the last decade, I have quietly supported my family. In response, they recently showed me their plan for the future. My silence since then has been interpreted as consent to their narrative. It is not. My silence was me waiting for the right moment to share the truth. That moment is now." Then I attached the evidence. Attachment 1. A crystal-clear photo of the distribution of assets page from the will, with the line "Leave our entire estate to his brother" highlighted. Attachment 2. A screenshot of the last 3 years of mortgage payments from my bank account. Over $75,000 in payments, clearly visible. Attachment 3. A screenshot of my dad's text, "Mortgage is due." Attachment 4. A screenshot of my reply, "Ask the heir." Attachment 5. The blurry photo I had taken from my car of my sick and aging father hoisting the 40-pound bag of fertilizer. I stared at the post for a full minute. This was the point of no return. This was airing my family's dirtiest laundry for the world to see. A part of me screamed not to do it, but the part of me that had been silenced for a decade screamed louder. I hit post. The effect was instantaneous. It was like dropping a match into a fireworks factory. The first comments were shock, then outrage, but not directed at me. An old high school friend wrote, "James, I am speechless. You are one of the most decent guys I know. For them to do this is unbelievable." My former colleague, Ben, who worked in real estate, commented, "A co-signed mortgage on a property you're not willed is financial malpractice. James, I'm so sorry you were put in this position." The tide turned in minutes. The same people who had been offering my parents sympathy were now silent or deleting their comments. My post was being shared, and shared again. Within an hour, my mother's post, my father's post, and Michael's post were all deleted. A few hours after that, their entire profiles were deactivated. They had started a public war armed with lies. I had ended it with a single brutal volley of the truth. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel happy. I just felt Empty. The hurricane had passed over, and all that was left was the wreckage. I had won, but I had lost my entire family in the process. The days following what my friends started calling the Facebook Judgment Day were surreal. The public battle was over, but the private war had left a landscape of ruin that I now had to navigate. The silence from my family was no longer a choice. It was a consequence. A deep, permanent chasm had opened, and my post had been the final dynamite blast that made it uncrossable. The fallout came in unexpected ways. The Monday after the weekend drama, my boss, Victoria, called me into her office. She was a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her late 40s, and I was sure I was in for a lecture about professional conduct and social media. She closed the door and gestured for me to sit. "James," she said, her expression unreadable. "I saw the activity on Facebook this weekend." "Victoria, I'm sorry if I started," but she held up a hand. "Don't apologize," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "I'm not here to lecture you. I'm here to tell you that my first husband's family tried to pull something similar on me with his life insurance after he passed. Family can be a battlefield." She looked me straight in the eye. "Your job is secure. Take any time you need. Look after yourself. That's an order." I was so stunned I could only stammer a thank you. It wasn't pity. It was solidarity. A quiet acknowledgement from a high-ranking ally that my fight was justified. It meant more than 1,000 sympathetic comments on Facebook. The support kept coming from strange corners. My ex, Emma, sent me a text. I hadn't heard from her in over a year. Saw the post. All I can say is, it's about time. I'm not surprised, but I am sorry it got that messy. Are you okay? It was a small olive branch, a validation of years of her own frustration, and it felt surprisingly good. I was beginning to realize that the family I had been trying so hard to please was just one small part of my world. I had friends, colleagues, a community, people who saw me for who I was, not for what I could provide. The most damning piece of the wreckage, however, was something I already knew, but now had to confront. The narrative of my father's poor health had been the emotional blackmail underpinning their entire financial strategy for years. My Facebook post with the fertilizer bag photo had publicly questioned it, but I needed to settle it in my own mind. That confirmation didn't come from a doctor violating privacy. It came from my own two eyes, again. About a week after the post, on a whim, I drove to a park near their neighborhood. It had a public golf driving range. And as I sat in my car in the parking lot, I saw him, my father. He was with two of his buddies, and he was swinging a golf club with a fluid, powerful motion that a man with a truly debilitating back condition could never manage. He laughed, he bent over to tee up another ball, he swung again. He looked fine, happy even, and in that moment, I felt the last vestiges of guilt inside me wither and die. It was all a lie. The whole narrative was a carefully constructed fiction designed to keep me in my place, to keep the money flowing. The sickness, the frailty, the neediness, it was a costume they wore when it was convenient. The final piece of news from their world came through the grapevine. Mr. Walter, the retired mailman, texted me. "James, a realtor put a for sale sign in your parents' yard this morning. Looks like they're trying to sell before the bank takes it." So that was their solution. Not to have Michael get a job. Not to downsize. But to sell the very thing they had destroyed our family over, hoping to cash out before the consequences caught up to them. I sat in my apartment that night, the quiet no longer feeling empty, but peaceful. The wreckage was all around me, yes, but I was standing on solid ground. I had survived the hurricane. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a survivor. And for the first time, I started to think not about what I had lost, but about what I could build in its place. The next 6 months were about rebuilding. Not a house, not a relationship, but myself. The silence from my family was total, and I learned to cherish it. It was the sound of freedom, the sound of my own thoughts, my own priorities, my own life finally taking center stage. I poured myself into my photography. I enrolled in a night class on portrait lighting. I spent my weekends exploring the Oregon coast, the Columbia River Gorge, the forests around Mount Hood, my new camera always with me. I was capturing light, shadows, moments of quiet beauty. I was teaching myself to see the world again, not as a series of problems to be solved, but as a place of potential wonder. My friend Marcus, who owned a small coffee shop downtown, saw some of my work. "James, this is really good," he said one afternoon, looking at a print I'd made of an old, weathered pier at sunrise. "You should display some of these here. Let people see them." The idea terrified me, to put my work, my vision, out there for public judgment. But then I realized I had already faced the worst public judgment imaginable and survived. What was a little art criticism compared to that? So we did it. We cleared a wall in the coffee shop and I hung a dozen of my best photos. I called the little exhibit Found Silence. On the opening night, a small crowd of friends and coffee shop regulars gathered. A woman I'd never met before, probably in her 60s, stood in front of a photo I'd taken of an elderly woman's hands wrapped around a warm mug of coffee. "I don't know why," she said to me, her eyes misty, "but every photo of yours feels like it's speaking for someone who's been silent for a long time." I just smiled. She had understood perfectly. The true turning point, the moment I knew the healing was real, came when I decided to seek out the one person who might understand my story better than anyone. My uncle, Robert. He was my father's younger brother, and he had been estranged from the family for 15 years. The family narrative was that Robert was selfish and unreliable. Now, I was starting to question every family narrative I'd ever been told. I found his number through a cousin and called him. I didn't just run into him by chance. I sought him out. I needed to know. We met at a quiet park overlooking the Willamette River. He looked like my father, but his eyes were calmer, his shoulders less burdened. "I was wondering when you might call," he said after we'd sat down on a bench. "You knew?" I asked. "I saw the fireworks on Facebook," he said with a wry smile. "Your mother's performance was familiar. She always was dramatic." He looked out at the water. "Let me guess. You were the responsible one. The one who fixed things, paid for things. And your brother was the one with potential who needed protecting." I just nodded, stunned. "My older brother, your father," Robert continued. "He was always the golden child. I was the one who was supposed to fix his mistakes. Our parents did the same thing to me that your parents did to you. They wrote me out of the will to leave everything to him. When I found out, I confronted them, and they called me selfish, ungrateful. It was like listening to a ghost from my own future." "What did you do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I walked away," he said simply. "It was the hardest thing I ever did. But my life didn't truly begin until I did." Sometimes, James, the kindest thing you can do for people like that is to let them feel the full weight of their own choices. The greatest gift you can give them is the absence of your help. We talked for 2 hours. He told me he'd heard from a cousin that my parents were struggling to sell the house. Potential buyers would ask for maintenance records, and Michael, who was now living with them, would just stare blankly. He didn't know how to answer because he'd never paid attention. He didn't know the last time the furnace was serviced or who had installed the new water heater. Because I had done it all. Talking to Robert wasn't just validation. It was liberation. I wasn't a singular anomaly, a uniquely failed son. I was part of a pattern, a generational cycle of dysfunction, and I was the one who had broken it. A few weeks after that, I received an email that I thought was a mistake. It was from a literary agent in New York. She had seen my Facebook post, which had been shared into a group for survivors of family emotional abuse, and she had been intrigued. She had found my little photography blog where I had started to write short captions, reflections on my journey. "I believe you have a story that needs to be told," she wrote. "A powerful story about self-worth, boundaries, and breaking free. Have you ever considered writing a book?" A book. The idea was absurd. But as I sat there, looking at her email, I realized my journey had come full circle. What began as private pain had been forced into the public eye, and now it had the potential to become a source of public purpose. I hesitated. Did I want to commercialize my pain? Turn my family's wreckage into a product? Then I thought of my conversation with Robert. I thought of the woman in the coffee shop. I thought of the hundreds of messages I'd received from strangers who said, "Your story is my story." I wrote back to the agent. I told her I was interested, but on one condition. A significant portion of any profits would be donated to a charity that provides counseling and support for people trying to escape toxic family dynamics. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about validation. It was about turning the deepest wound of my life into a source of healing, not just for me, but for anyone else who felt alone in that same silent struggle. It was a new dawn, and I was finally ready to step into the light. It's been a year now. 1 year since I sent that 5-word text message. The world didn't end. It just rearranged itself. I heard through my Uncle Robert that my parents finally sold the house. They had to drop the price significantly because of the deferred maintenance that had piled up in the year since I'd been gone. They bought a small condo in a retirement community an hour away. Michael didn't go with them. He had to get a real job, an entry-level position at a big box store, to afford his own tiny apartment. The Bank of James was permanently closed, and reality had finally come for everyone. I don't feel satisfaction at their downfall. I don't feel much of anything about them anymore. They are just people I used to know, characters in a story that has already been told. The anger is gone. The hurt is gone. All that's left is a scar, and like any scar, it's a reminder of a wound that has healed, a battle that was survived. My book, The Air You Never Asked For, is coming out in the spring. Writing it was the hardest thing I've ever done. I had to revisit every painful memory, every slight, every moment of betrayal. But this time, I wasn't a victim in the story. I was the author. I controlled the narrative. And in doing so, I took away the last bit of power they had over me. Then came the trickiest part, the silver minivan. The one I had co-signed for 2 years ago when their old car died and their credit was too shot to get a loan on their own. This was my biggest vulnerability. I couldn't just remove my name. I called the financing company the next day, my stomach in knots. I explained the situation to a woman on the phone who sounded like she was reading from a script. "I'm a co-signer on a loan and I need to be removed," I said. "That's not possible, sir," she recited in a monotone. "The only way to remove a co-signer is for the primary borrower to refinance the loan solely under their own name. And what if they can't get approved for a refinance on their own?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Then you remain equally and fully responsible for the loan," she said. "If payments are missed, it will negatively impact your credit score as well as theirs." I felt a surge of hot frustration. Of course, they had me trapped. My name was on the hook. But then an idea came to me. Cold, simple, and ruthless idea. They wanted to play games with legal documents? Fine, two can play. "Okay," I said, my voice calm again. "I understand. Thank you for the information." I hung up. I couldn't get my name off the loan, but the payments were being automatically debited from the joint account I had just closed. They would have to figure out how to make the payments themselves now. If they missed a payment, yes, it would ding my excellent credit. But I could absorb a hit. I could recover. Could they? If it went into default, the car would be repossessed. And that, I decided with a chilling sense of finality, was not my problem anymore. The final step was a digital cleansing. I went into my phone's calendar and, with a grim satisfaction, I deleted every single recurring reminder that had cluttered up my life for years. Call mom to check in. Delete. Remind dad about cardiologist appointment. Delete. Pay parents' mortgage. Delete. I deleted them all. I watched as my calendar, for the first time in my adult life, became a blank slate. It was empty. It was just mine. A few days later, the real desperation from them began, and it was clear they had no idea what I had done. My mom tried calling. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. Then came the text, "James, I just received a notification from the bank that the mortgage payment failed. There must be a problem with the account. Can you look into it? This is serious." I replied with the same cold, irrefutable logic they had used on me. "There's no problem with the account, Mom. Closed it. As per your will, the house belongs to Michael." The mortgage that comes with it should be his responsibility too. Michael texted me again, and this time his tone wasn't cajoling, it was furious. You're being so selfish. You're really gonna let them lose the house? After everything they did for you? I stared at that message, at the sheer, unmitigated audacity of it. Everything they did for me? They had given me life, yes, but they had spent the last decade making me feel like I was paying off an unpayable debt for the privilege. I typed back slowly, choosing my words like daggers. What they did for me was legally declare that I am not their heir, while still expecting me to be their financier. What I'm doing now is called setting a boundary. You should Google it. You might learn something about being an adult. He didn't reply. The storm had broken. The lines were drawn in concrete. I stood on one side, alone, with my bruised heart and my terrifying newfound freedom. On the other side stood my family, huddled together in their castle, about to find out that the walls were made of paper and the moat had just been drained. And they had absolutely no idea how far I was willing to let them fall to learn their lesson. Last week, I drove by the old house on Maple Avenue. A new family was living there. A young couple with a little girl who was riding her tricycle on the sidewalk. I saw the dad come out and lift her up, spinning her around as she shrieked with laughter. There was so much joy in that small moment. The house looked happier. It was finally being filled with the kind of love it deserved. I didn't feel a sense of loss. I just smiled and drove on. That wasn't my home anymore. I've learned that family isn't about blood. It's about respect. It's about trust. It's about who shows up for you when the chips are down, not who expects you to provide all the chips. Family is the home you build inside yourself first. A place of self-respect, of boundaries, of knowing you are worthy of love without having to pay for it. My family now is Uncle Robert, who I have lunch with every other Sunday. It's my friend Marcus, who still has my photos up in his coffee shop. It's my boss Victoria, who saw a fellow survivor in me. It's the community of readers who write to me every day, sharing their own stories of breaking free. My life is smaller now in some ways. No big family Christmases, no chaotic Thanksgiving dinners. But it's also infinitely larger. It's calmer. It's more authentic. It's mine. And I wouldn't trade that for any inheritance in the world. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it has touched you in some way. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect your own peace? I'd be honored if you'd share your story in the comments below. And please, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.